From the sunny and warm Copenhagen, welcome to the webinar Building Trust in ESCOs in a Developing Country Context, the case of Kenya, hosted by the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. My name is Aris. I'm working as a program officer at the Copenhagen Center, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. A couple of things before we move to the main content of our webinar. This webinar is going to be about 40 to 50 minutes long, including time for Q&A at the end. If you cannot stay until the end or want to get back to our presentations, all the materials and the recording of the whole webinar will be available online in a few days. Before we start discussing about today's topic, I would like to inform our attendees that we comply with the General Data Protection Act, also known as GDPR. This means that your personal data such as name, email, workplace, etc. is safely processed and stored, and all of your rights pursuant to the GDPR are respected. You have full access to the data being processed about you, and at any time you can request that inaccurate data be deleted or rectified. For access or further information, please contact with the people that are presented here. A few things about the Copenhagen Center. The Center conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as energy efficiency hub for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The Center has an established network of global, regional, and national partners with a broad range of stakeholders to help accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency activities. On a regular basis, the Global ESCO Network will be conducting webinars. All materials, including recordings and presentations from previous webinars, can be found on Global's ESCO Network library under the webinar section. The material of today's topic will be uploaded shortly, but until then, you can check some previous ones. Now, I would like to briefly introduce the speakers of today's webinar. We will start with Søren. Søren is working as senior economist at UNEP-PTU Partnership. He has a PhD in climate policy with experience from 10 years of service in the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Fenwicks has more than 10 years of experience in energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy policy and economics, quality management systems, and project management fields. He currently works as the Senior Energy Efficiency Officer at Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, where he has been working for 6 years. There, he is in charge of the Energy Efficiency Department. Finally, I would like to inform that you can send us your question during the presentations using the dedicate icon, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. Please do not forget to mention the name of the panelist that the question is for. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Søren.
Thank you very much, Aris. And I would like to echo your welcome to all our guests at the webinar on behalf of the Global ESCO Network. The Global ESCO Network is a relatively new organization established in the middle of 2019. We are a network of ESCO associations, so not exactly of ESCOs, but associations that represent ESCOs. So as such, we call ourselves a network of networks. We established the Global ESCO Network in order to be a global driver and to inspire governments for action to scaling up the contribution of ESCOs, in particular to the global response for mitigating the threat of climate change. And that means that we are not taking the usual approach as an energy sector representative, but we are taking the ESCOs and the energy efficiency agenda from a climate change perspective. We are looking at the ESCOs particularly as an instrument as a response for governments in their efforts to reduce emissions. So our mission statement is to add and reinforce existing efforts of national and regional ESCO associations. As I said, we are not representing ESCOs directly, but we are representing the ESCO associations that work with ESCOs directly. We want to promote an increased activity by the ESCO sector at a global scale by working for a formal recognition, first and foremost, for the ESCO sector as a pathway for countries to strengthen and achieve energy efficiency ambitions in their nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement for climate change. Meaning, again, as I said, we are looking at ESCOs, particularly in the context of the climate change agenda, and how the ESCO, as a practical approach to achieving energy efficiency, can contribute to countries' also cost-efficient responses to their obligations under the Paris Agreement. For that, we also find it's necessary to support a better understanding within the finance sector of energy performance contracting, which is one of the main instruments that ESCOs are using, enabling investors to engage in the provision of financial resources to facilitate exactly the activities that ESCOs are focusing on. And finally, we also want to document the benefits of applying ESCO principles in business and policy development through an international mapping and benchmarking of the framework conditions for successful operation of ESCOs. That is, in fact, one of the activities that we are engaging in right now, and I would just give you a couple of minutes on that later. Our key functions is to provide ESCO advocacy in national and international fora. That is, again, to spread the word and to make sure that policymakers understand the value of the ESCO and the ESCO approaches, again, in the context of climate change primarily. We also do global scale research, and that is what I will mention in a couple of minutes, to document the value of ESCOs and their contribution to emissions reduction. And finally, we also try, or we at least hope to achieve the securing of resources and funding for developing policies and training programs that can focus again on improving the basis for ESCO operation. As I said, we are currently researching on the conditions, the framework conditions for ESCOs in a number of countries. We're simply trying to map the regulatory barriers for ESCOs, the barriers that ESCOs encounter, not only that are specifically targeted at ESCOs, but because of the ESCO business model, quite commonly ESCOs enter into conflicts with existing regulation that is not targeted at ESCOs at all, but happen to have a negative effect on the business model of ESCOs. One such example could be the limitation on contract durations for public sector entities, that they cannot, in many countries, enter into contracts that last more than 1, sometimes 2 years, so within a budget period, but not beyond a budget period, which is rarely sufficient for an ESCO contract to be commercially viable. So normally you would need to have 3, 4, 5, 6 years contracts. In some countries you can have 10, 15, 20 years contracts with a public sector entity, which is then sort of improving the possibility that the ESCO can draft a contract which is sufficient for the commercial operation, its commercial operation. But in many countries that is not the case. It is not because they don't like ESCOs, but it's because they do not have access to budget beyond their budgetary period, or because those regulations are put in place to hinder corruption. But whatever the reason, they come or they stand in the way for the ESCO's business model. So just an example, that is the kind of regulations that we are mapping. Of course, there are also intended barriers, but those are actually quite few. We haven't found any, in fact, so far in the countries we've analyzed. And finally, of course, there's also promotional efforts for energy efficiency, but in some cases, those promotional efforts, in fact, exclude ESCOs, specifically from the promotion or from grants that you would be able to achieve for energy efficiency investments. We are mapping that in hopefully 15, maybe even 20 countries, and we hope to be able to publish the results before the COP26 in Glasgow here in November. So just finally, a few words on how far we are. We are mapping here the ESCO associations all over the world. Those countries with the color are countries with an ESCO association. Those countries that are green are countries that have an ESCO association, which is part or a partner to the global ESCO network. We have not colored Australia green yet, but Australia is now also on board. So there are quite few countries left that need to partner with us before we can claim to be truly global. But we are getting there. The total number of associations, I think, is 38, between 35 and 38 on a global scale. It's sometimes a question of definition. And one thing, just here to conclude, what we are doing and what today's event is a part of is a series of webinars that we have been running since the beginning of the year. We are running until December, as you can see here. These are the remaining webinars on ESCOs that we are running this year. So today we have Fenwicks Musonye from Kenya presenting in a minute from now. We will have another 5 webinars in fact, until the end of the year, before we can conclude our series of the 2021 webinars. Of course, we would be happy to see you also on coming events. Otherwise, check us out at the globalesconetwork.org website, where you can find this webinar, the future webinars, as well as other supporting materials, including a recently established library of essential documentations for ESCOs. It's all in there for you to use. And of course, you're always welcome to contact us with questions, proposals, wishes to collaborate. We are always happy to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for converging here for the webinar. I will present a perspective on how we can build trust of ESCO or trust in ESCO markets in developing countries. Specifically, I'll be dealing with giving examples based on the Kenyan market. Just to my format of presentation, I will have around 8 topics I'll introduce. Then I talk something about the energy consumption in Kenya and the energy efficiency status. Then the contemporary framework that energy efficiency market adopts in the country. Then the barriers to energy efficiency in developing countries, Kenya being one of them. Then I will now introduce ESCOs and why they're important to give solutions to these barriers to energy efficiency. Then the potential trust issues. These are issues we've done studies in other countries where ESCOs exist, and these issues have been documented. Then the solutions to these trust issues. Then the way forward. Maybe I just give a disclaimer that the perspectives presented here are personal. It's not the position of the government of Kenya or maybe African Union. So as my colleague Lütken said, the ESCOs are perspectives there in terms of nationally determined contributions. Kenya submitted her targets in December 28th, where the country is hoping to improve to reduce the emissions, which currently are at 143 megatons of CO2 equivalent. So to do this, of course, one of the ways of achieving this is by going by the energy efficiency way. Of course, there are other ways which one might follow to achieve this 2% reduction in emissions by 2030. So some of these pathways of reducing this, of course, is industries and buildings, mostly looking at the terms of energy efficiency on the demand side. Then the transport sector. Then there is, of course, the geoengineering. It's a new concept where someone you can plant very many trees just for sequestration of CO2. Then, of course, there's the generation side and the agriculture and other side. So specifically, the ESCOs in this context will be on the industry and buildings efficiency side. Generally, looking at the field in terms of energy consumption in Kenya, and this is the study as per 2019, the report, the annual consumption was 8769 gigawatts. And maybe to bring this in context, 55% of this was in commercial and industrial sector. That's why this focus has to be there. The same thing with the petroleum products. Of course, much of it went to transport sector, but 12% also went to commercial industrial sector. That's in 2019. So actually, this gives us the rationale as to why energy efficiency has to be one of the solutions of meeting our NDC targets by 2030. But then, how is efficiency performing in the field there? So Kenya at the moment has regulations that target more than 3,500 energy consuming facilities. These facilities are supposed to comply with energy efficiency provisions, but only 43% have fully complied with the provisions of the efficiency. So with 100% compliance, of course, it's estimated that 2563 gigawatt hours of energy per year would be saved there. This translates to, of course, if you change into CO2 equivalent, that's 0.33 kilograms of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour in Kenya. So far, instead of us saving 2563, we've only saved 1102 gigawatt hours per year. So this gap has to be bridged, of course. There need to be interventions to reach the 2563. And what's the framework used for this? Or how do we go about that in terms of energy efficiency and energy auditing process? Because for energy efficiency, one must plan first. In the planning section, the government plays a role there. Facilities, these are the energy consumers, play roles there. Energy auditors play roles there. And then financial institutions, as well as in the auditing process itself. The three players play roles. Then in the measurement and verification, you'll find also the three players, actually the four players play a chief role there. Because one, there has to be to establish a need to conduct an energy audit in a facility. And this need is on two fronts. One is global. When we say it's global, it's the government policy says facilities have to conduct audits. Then, of course, on the micro level where the facility itself is, they also need to conduct an audit because of the inherent financial benefits. So once these ones identify the need for that audit, of course, they procure the services of auditors. Then it goes now outside the hands of the government. It goes to now the auditors of the facilities themselves, where this study process of the study of process and energy flows is conducted. That's just the energy auditing process until the ECMs, the energy conservation measures, have been designed. Then, of course, the plan is implemented. The government must approve that plan. That's as per the Kenyan. Then, of course, it has to be implemented. One has to measure and verify and report. Now, in the measurement, verification, and reporting is why you can actually say our NDCs have been met. That's why also the government plays a role there. Then this process ends there. But once a facility on a micro level identifies the need to conduct an audit, there are various pathways it can follow. One, of course, it can just do nothing and be there. Maybe the government can catch up with the facility, maybe prescribe some penalties for that, or the facility can do it by itself, because you'll find there are facilities, or very few, which have experts within their own set up, and they can use their own money to conduct audits and do everything up to measurement and verification. Another option would be to look for energy auditors, which currently the government of Kenya licenses energy auditors, whom we hope, of course, they'll translate into ESCOs in future. So the auditors, of course, they will give recommendations after doing the audit. Then these facilities look for financing from banks to implement the ECMs, and then the internal, the employees of the facility, of course, implement the ECMs. But then there is another option now, the ESCO option, the one that the Global ESCO Network, of course, has to champion, where maybe through a facilitators, the facility goes to the ESCO market. So this player comes in with a wholesale solution, as it is. That's the consulting, the energy auditing, that's the procurement, installs, sometimes runs the system to test. Then they do measurement and verification, where they are paid to that. But all these, of course, now there are many obstacles. Whichever pathway the facility takes. The first obstacle in this country, in the developed markets, of course, is prioritization of projects, because you'll find facilities are trying to expand. So you might find instead of doing energy audits, they might find it not one of the priority projects. So they go for adding an additional line of production. Then, of course, again, when you want to prioritize, probably one has to get someone, an expert in terms of quality of products and an expert in terms of energy efficiency. They'll prioritize to get maybe a quality expert for their facility or safety instead of energy efficiency. So this gives us the skills and the financial resource problem. Then, of course, we also have unrealistic energy conservation measures. This is a problem that, of course, widespread, especially in countries that in their inception stages of doing audits. I was checking even in other countries like Europe, where when audits programs are beginning, there's a problem with the measures. So this is a skills problem which has to be developed with the time. Then, of course, the facility itself, because this unrealistic ECMs are skill problems related to auditors. Then there are also less skills and knowledge of the facility in terms of energy efficiency. The facility may not understand what energy efficiency is because it's not a tangible investment. So it brings issues in terms of making a decision. Then, of course, there are also inadequate mechanisms of verification. Even after these audits have been implemented, you might find the problem of verifying if the benefits have been met is there because of these frameworks. So ESCOs then become, of course, so to speak, the silver bullet to assist this, where an ESCO comes in. It will solve the skill issue. They start the audit by themselves. They source for finance to implement ECMs. Of course, depending if it's shared, the modality of the ESCO arrangement. Then they procure and do installation and commissioning. Then there is measurement and verification. This might have issues, but it can be solved in case there's a misunderstanding between the facility and the ESCO. Then, of course, the ESCO gets paid based on performance as per the ECM. Then, of course, the energy is saved, emissions are abated. Then the NDC targets can be met by just using ESCOs as the potential solutions to EE. But then the problem is, what are the barriers? Looking at the current the current situation in Kenya and developing countries, and in what has transpired in other countries that have been having ESCOs, there are three broad problems that an ESCO might meet. The first one is pipeline of projects, because if an ESCO to survive, it must have projects to be conducting all the time. But in Kenya and in other jurisdictions, that's in developing countries, there is inadequate participation of government facilities in energy efficiency programs. Then, of course, facilities themselves, as I said previously in the previous slide, they don't appreciate energy efficiency as an investment, because you see, energy efficiency is not tangible. So by the time you explain that energy efficiency has inherent benefits, where avoided costs is like an income, it's also a problem. Then, of course, there is an inadequate awareness of energy efficiency regulatory requirements in the country. Some of the facilities may not understand the whole hog of the regulations. So these three barriers lead to throttling the pipeline of projects. You'll find the projects are not coming through quickly. Then, of course, we are talking about financial problems, high upfront costs on energy efficiency investment, high transaction costs. That's in terms of first conducting the audit itself, then even measurement and verification and all that. Then there is energy price fluctuations. This is a problem that might affect either an ESCO or the facility, because payments are pegged on the savings in energy, but then do you peg it on the existing energy price or on the contemporary one, where if it changes, you pay using that? So that's one of another problem that might bring trust issues in this market. Then there's the issue of knowledge and skills. Inadequate measurement and verification skills. There are existing frameworks, of course, right now for measurement and verification skills, but of course, one has to be trained first to understand that. So there needs to be expertise even in this kind of training. Then, of course, there's inadequacy of energy efficiency knowledge and skills. So what are the solutions to the market trust issues? The first one suggested is that although the existing regulations, especially in Kenya, they designate facilities that are supposed to have these energy efficiency programs, and this designation does not segregate public sector from private sector, but there need to be more just emphasize on government facilities, because government facilities are mostly constrained by budget. They work on very strict budget timelines, and by the time they engage maybe an auditor, the way it's Lütken was said in his introductory remarks, you'll find maybe it spills beyond the budget year, so it goes for maybe an ECM goes for 3 years. So there has to be a mandatory legal requirement for government facilities to adopt energy management systems in the operations, not just energy efficiency, but the whole cycle. Then in terms of performance contracting, because there are several issues, including quality management systems, where government agencies are supposed to adhere to QMS. So the same would apply to energy efficiency, whereby it becomes part of a performance contract for government agencies. Then there has to be establishment of energy facilitators. Facilitators, what they do, they try to assist facilities to understand these seemingly complex concepts in energy efficiency, so that a facility can now be able to engage energy service companies from a point of understanding. Currently, there are no facilitators in Kenya in terms of energy efficiency. They are there in terms of energy, renewable energy, actually even in other developing countries. Then there should be formation of super ESCOs. Now, a super ESCO, of course, is we sort of a godfather, because when ESCOs are developing, they will have issues in terms of skills, because it will be a new field, even if we get players from outside the country. So these super ESCOs assist first in terms of holding the hands of the ESCOs to pick. Then two, the super ESCOs also assist in terms of generating a pipeline of projects, because when a super ESCO comes in, it has the trust already. Most super ESCOs are the backing of government, or most they are government. So it's easy for them to get projects, to get the trust of the facilities, and even to get the financing. Then through the financing of the super ESCOs, now they take the finances to the ESCOs. Then the ESCOs pick from there. Now they gain traction. Currently, of course, like in Kenya, there are plans to form a super ESCO with the Africa Development Bank and our utility, that's Kenya Power. So this super ESCO would be useful in terms of assisting to get the pipeline of projects. Then there's establishment of energy efficiency revolving fund for public facilities. And how does this work? This would assist mostly in let's say the government has around 300 agencies. So there will be a fund where maybe the first 10 agencies, they implement the energy efficiency projects. Then the money they get from there, the savings go back to the fund. So that fund goes to the second batch of the government facilities. So this will assist actually to deal with the issues of the budget constraints that all government entities always have. And this consolidated this revolving fund will be helpful in ensuring that the ESCOs will now have a pipeline of projects. Now, for financial, one, for these ESCOs to improve or to be propped up properly, they should be assisted, of course, in terms of incentives and all that, fiscal policies. But one then, who is an ESCO? Because when there is a field that is a bit crowded and it's not well defined, you might find people, ghost entities calling themselves ESCOs and maybe calling for such incentives. So there should be clarity on definition of ESCOs for administration of financial incentives in the regulations. This in Kenya, fortunately, has been adopted in the draft regulations. The ESCOs are a bit specific here. That's for performance, energy performance contracting, and of course defining on where do they start and where do they end in a project. Then there are fiscal policies to ESCO markets. Some of these policies are like if an ESCO, let's say an ESCO is having an equipment, there's what you call the depreciation, accelerated depreciation. Then of course there are the investment tax credits and all those fiscal incentives that the government can give to these ESCO markets. Sometimes, like when you are doing a transfer of a project, ESCO-based project, especially the fixed assets, then they are supposed to not to attract VAT. This happens in other countries actually, like India, I think, where when they're doing the transfer, there is no VAT levied on that. Then, of course, there is also the formation of an ESCO association for lobbying, but not only for lobbying, also for capacity building. Because you'll find this, some of these associations like NIESCO for US and even the one for Turkey, EODA, they assist also in helping ESCOs to improve their skills. So if this ESCO association is formed, then it will assist first for lobbying, but second for ensuring that they have improved their trust in the market, because you see banks mostly operate on trust. If they have to give you money, they have to know that you're doing the correct thing. So if this association would be useful in professional development of all the ESCOs and ESCO employees to make sure that the market thrives from there. Development of energy efficiency consolidated fund for ESCO is also important. Now, this one's dealing with the issue of fluctuating prices, because an ESCO might suffer actually prices keep on fluctuating. They may not, and then there are contractual issues. So, like in Kenya, currently there is a consolidated fund for petroleum products. When the prices fluctuate a lot, they come in to try to do the stabilization. So this could be another intervention where such a fund could be created, maybe by collecting some money from the ESCOs every year. Then it will be useful to assist them the time there are fluctuations. Throughout the presentation, I've talked about knowledge and skills. Even though this one comes last, but it's one of the important issues that have to be dealt with, both in energy audits and even in ESCOs. There is the concept of local curriculum for energy efficiency, measurements, and verification. Currently, mostly this country and even most of the Anglophone countries in Africa, they use curriculum from USA. Most of them, it's CM, CMVP, and all that. But this curriculum sometimes they don't really talk to the real situation in Kenya. You'll find like in our country, we don't have a district heating systems, or even building in energy use in building is not very significant. But you find now the existing curriculum focus most of their parts on that, and then this now creates a gap, because mostly in Kenya, a bulk of our energy goes to industry and commercial sectors. We've seen, but I was presenting the percentages there, and this is where focus has to be most of the times. So there is need, of course, to develop this curriculum first to ensure that facilities have trust in our auditors, and auditors, of course, they're supposed to be, they will be part of the ESCOs. at some stage. And then, of course, there should be adoption of measurement verification protocols. At the moment, of course, the standards body is developing these protocols, so they have to be adopted first by the country and, of course, and by other players in this region to ensure that whenever there is a problem in terms of verification, which is one of the major issues in ESCO business transactions, this has to ensure that this can be solved using this. And to go with these protocols, of course, there are templates in terms of contracts, where if you have a very good template in terms of contracts and which is flexible enough to cover different transactions, it becomes easy to forestall many problems that might come or might be associated with the issues of contract in terms of payments, measurement, verification. Then, of course, there have to be training programs by government and manufacturers association. These programs also just feed into issues of improving the skills and knowledge. There's always a new developments coming in terms of research, in terms of knowledge in this energy efficiency field. So the government and the manufacturers association have to be on the lookout. Most of the governments do this through their regulators, who are supposed to be hubs of knowledge in terms of energy efficiency. So these programs are supposed now to relay such kind of new information to ESCOs to ensure that they are up to date with the new technologies, new development, to try and improve that. So the way forward, because these are a number of interventions, but these interventions, of course, they're supposed to be focused to ensure efficiency. So the interventions should be on ESCO side-based interventions. Then there should be client side-based interventions. Client side is the facility. There should be interventions that specifically linked to assist the facility to develop trust in the ESCO market. Then there are those based on the transaction, which they focus both on both parties in the market. And this on transaction, of course, mostly relies on the contracts, templates, measurement and verification protocols, and of course stating just when there is a problem between these two players who comes in to assist. Thank you very much. That is my presentation. To you, Aris.
Thank you very much, Fenwicks, for your presentation. Now we reached to the point to respond to some questions for the Q&A session. So what I request is Fenwicks to activate your web camera so everybody will be able to see us. Thank you very much. Now let's start with the first question that we received, and the question is: which elements are already in place in Kenya to create an ESCO ecosystem?
Okay, thank you very much, Aris, for that question. The first one is, of course, there has to be a requirement that facilities must conduct energy audits, which is already in place. We've had the regulation since 2012, where some facilities have been conducting energy audits. So this is already a market for ESCOs to start. Then the second element, of course, is the regulatory, where we have now incorporated the requirements for ESCO registration in our laws. So possibly from next year, January, we'll be licensing ESCOs to start operating in the country for energy performance contracting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fenwicks. The next question that we receive is about biomass energy. And the question is there an ESCO model for facilities that utilize biomass energy?
Okay, yes, there is, and that model, of course, is on energy supply contract model, which is not necessarily energy efficiency. Of course, it's energy fuel switching. So that goes to renewable energy. Such facilities, of course, already exist in Kenya, where you'll find there are those who convert boilers, mostly HFO boilers, into biomass boilers. Then they supply steam from biomass then of course they are paid based on the energy supply contracting. So such a system exists in Kenya, although that is not the ESCO that the energy management regulations will be envisaging. The one for the regulations will be specifically on energy performance contracting.
Thank you. And the next question that we receive is, how does energy efficiency work as argument for energy access?
Okay, fine. That's in terms of course, where the national grid or the infrastructure has to lessen, or the demand from the infrastructure has to lessen. So when you do the energy efficiency interventions, you save, for example, maybe let's say you're saving 35 megawatts of a power station. So if such a power station or a power plant is constructed, then the energy freed from energy efficiency goes into feeding the unserved areas, because there are some areas which don't have access to energy at the moment. So the more efficient a facility becomes, the less the energy it demands from the grid, then the more the energy the grid has to serve other areas that don't have electricity, and that increases, of course, energy access. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We received another question which starts first with a comment. A large number of enterprises are in the informal sector. They have an additional set of barriers, for example, access to finance. How do you suggest to reach out to them?
Okay, first, what the country did, because in terms of energy efficiency, you look at cost-benefit analysis. So an energy audit is an expensive endeavor, one. Then two, of course, implementing the ECMs is also expensive. So a cost-benefit model was developed, and you'll find most of the informal sector players are not affected by the regulations which demand that they conduct energy audit. But what happens, of course, there are those who do it voluntarily, SMEs. Those small and medium enterprises are in Kenya Association of Manufacturers, which is a body, and this body sometimes it reaches out to them to conduct audits. And how are these audits done? Of course, when these small enterprises want to do audits, the government has invested some money into the Association of Manufacturers. That's what we call the Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation. So this money is used to substitute or to subsidize energy audit cost. So the government pays through this association a fraction of the fee for audits. Then these players also pay some of the money. Then now they can conduct the audit. Although this does not go beyond conducting an audit in terms of implementation, then these facilities have to do it on their own.
Thank you very much, Fenwicks. The next question is pretty short. It's like, what are the energy prices in Kenya?
Okay, fine. It depends on who you ask, because they are different. Our current tariff model is different for different facilities. The more the KVA you get, the lesser the charge you'll be charged. But averagely, it could be around 17. We're averaging all the categories. Could be around 17 US cents per unit if you average everything.
Thanks. We have another question, and it goes: would it be relevant to look at supply-side energy efficiency in Kenya, and could ESCOs engage in this market?
Yes, quite. It's quite relevant actually. But we part of our national energy efficiency strategy, which we rolled out last year, in partnership with the DTU, was to look at the supply side efficiency. But what I mean by supply side is from a generation up to the metering point to a customer. So we're talking of distribution, transmission, substations, and this is part of the areas that have been focused on in terms of our energy efficiency or energy management regulations. Our generators always conduct energy audits. Actually, the biggest generator is KenGen. KenGen, they always conduct energy audits, and they try to improve on their efficiency every time. So when you look at our, in terms of energy efficiency, we look at supply side in terms of generation and transmission. Then you look at the consumption side. But in the consumption side, of course, now we look at the facilities that consume more than 180,000 units per year. That's when we start focusing on the demand on the consumption side.
We have a question that says, if you can expand the role of Super ESCO and how they will serve in the Kenyan market.
Okay, thank you. Now, the Super ESCO will be formed first under Kenya Power. Kenya Power is our utility, national utility. Of course, the FDB, African Development Bank, were astonished that our utility has accepted a Super ESCO when you see the work of the utilities to sell power, but then they are still assisting us in terms of hosting the ESCO. Now, this ESCO will be supported by African Development Bank and the government of Kenya, and then it will be run at the utility. How will they work? We are starting with government entities. So this Super ESCO will get some money from FDB and from the government, of course, and some financiers. Then they will bring in the infant ESCOs. Infant ESCOs, the young ESCOs, which will start registering next year. So they will collect the ESCOs. The Super ESCO will not do anything in terms of doing the actual work. So they'll bring the ESCOs together. Then they will allocate them those projects. Maybe we start with the government buildings. So we'll say ESCO number 1, you live with the government building A to Z, A to B, or A to C. Then this is the money that we are giving you. Then they will hold their hands in terms of assisting them to do the measurement and verification, in terms of doing the audit itself, the expertise. Then, of course, in terms of even doing the contracts, in terms of writing the contracts with the government utilities. Then, of course, they'll walk all the way up to where they're going now to be, the money's going to be paid back. Now, who gets to be paid back this money? The ESCO. Then the ESCO pays back the money to the Super ESCO. So by the time the Super ESCO will be done, maybe in the next 5 years or 10 years, they will exit the stage and now let the ESCOs thrive on their own. So a Super ESCO is there just for the inception stages of the ESCO market. Then once the ESCO market gains traction, these Super ESCOs are going to leave. But before they leave, the first thing is the Super ESCO should win itself out of FDB and government. So the Super ESCO will lead ESCOs into going to the commercial bank way. The Super ESCO leaves money from, it stops using money from FDB and the government of Kenya. Then they go to the commercial bank market. Because now you see commercial banks will trust a Super ESCO because it's backed by the government. Now, as they start going there, of course, they'll also lead now the ESCOs to that direction. So the ESCOs now get used to getting money from the banks. After some stage, now the Super ESCO will now exit the stage and leave the market to thrive using the market forces.
Thank you very much, Fenwicks. The next question includes a little bit of acronyms, so I hope you might know what the acronym means. And the question is there any plan to separate the CEEC from KAM for managing ESCOs in the country?
Fine. I know that question has come from a Kenyan. So one, the CEEC is actually a center that's supported by the government. But KM, in terms of the ESCOs, KM will be assisting as a facilitator. What you say, the facilitator assists these facilities to understand energy efficiency in depth. So they bring maybe expertise because CEC and KM, they both have expertise. So they bring expertise and assist now the facilities to run. But in terms of ESCO management, CEC and KM are not going to be there in terms of managing the ESCOs, but they'll be there in terms of assisting the facilities as the facilitators. Because there was a slide I was presenting about the pathways, and when you move the facility, before you go to ESCO, you go to the facilitator in between. So KM and CEC are going to adopt that position where they'll be facilitators of that. But at the same time, as I was talking about the Super ESCOs, it's the same thing with CEC. CEC is supposed, of course, to assist the country to pick or to gain traction in energy efficiency. And of course, it has a shelf life. So at some stage, of course, CEC will also have to go once, of course, now energy efficiency has become a normal way of doing things in the facilities. But as for now, it's good. It assists in helping facilities to comply with energy audits.
Thanks, Fenwicks. The next question is, when we talk of a consolidated fund for ESCOs, who are we imagining will be the custodian?
Okay, something the way the petroleum fund has been working, although of course now this have to be ironed out. Any money in this country, the custodian of money in this country is the treasury, if that money is managed by the government. So by law, any money that comes that's supposed to be consolidated and run by the government, the money will be at the treasury. Maybe the question will be who administers it. Now, during administration, of course, of such funds, that's where we have the association of ESCOs, which is supposed to come in and start working, because you see the way even the money from government is being administered through KM, and KM is an association of private entities. The same thing can still work, but the primary custodian of money in this country that the government collects, it's the treasury. Thank you.
So I think that was it. Thank you for the detailed responses to the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end of the webinar. Unfortunately, we don't have more time to respond to all your questions. I would like to say thanks to the panelists for the informative and interesting presentations, and to the audience for the active participation. We hope that the presentations will be beneficial for all stakeholders involved in energy efficiency and ESCOs. The recording and all the presentations will be available in a few days at the Copenhagen Center Knowledge Management System. So thank you for your attention and wish you a good day or night from Copenhagen. Bye.